With only hours left before his execution, his final request wasn't for a last meal or a final phone call. It wasn't for forgiveness or a desperate appeal for mercy. He asked to see his dog. One last time. The request rippled through the penitentiary like a cold draft through an old house. Guards paused mid-stride. Paperwork stopped in hands. Even the fluorescent lights seemed to hum differently. It wasn't unusual for condemned inmates to ask strange things on their last day, but this was different. That morning, the air inside Ridgway State Penitentiary felt heavier than usual, thick with a kind of tension that pressed on lungs and slowed footsteps. The metal doors slammed with a sharper echo. The jangling of keys sounded like funeral bells. Conversations whispered down sterile hallways turned quickly into silence, as if the walls themselves insisted on respect for the dead man walking. In his cell, Daniel Ridgway sat on the edge of his narrow cot, fingers loosely interlaced, staring at the scuffed concrete floor. 7 years behind bars had reshaped him, hollowed him out, softened him in ways even he didn't fully understand. His beard had grown in unevenly. The creases beneath his eyes hinted at sleepless nights and too many memories clawing at him. He wasn't the same man who had entered this place 7 years ago. Not the angry, exhausted mechanic who was dragged through a brutal trial after the night everything went wrong. That version of him was gone. What remained was quieter, slower, older. When the warden arrived at his cell that morning, the guards had expected the usual final requests: a towering burger, a call to estranged family, a cigar, a Bible, a specific song played through the intercom. Daniel lifted his gaze slowly, his voice gravelly yet steady. "I just want to see my dog, Milo." Silence expanded, thick and stunned. The younger guards exchanged puzzled looks. The older ones stared at Daniel with something else, maybe curiosity, maybe something softer. Of all the things a man could want before he died, why a dog? Why that? For Daniel, the answer was simple. Milo wasn't just a pet. He was the last piece of Daniel's old life that still felt real. Through the storm of the arrest, the trial, the accusations, and the merciless glare of reporters, Milo had been the only creature who never doubted him. The dog who had waited by the front door every night, who nudged Daniel's hand whenever he sensed the man's pain, who slept curled at Daniel's feet like a promise he would never leave. In the end, Daniel didn't want a final conversation with people who had already decided who he was. He wanted to look into the eyes that never questioned him. The warden frowned, tapping a pen against his clipboard. In his decades of overseeing executions, he'd seen everything. Men who wanted a feast, men who wanted their ashes spread in odd places, men who wanted forgiveness from people who refused to come. But a dog? On execution day? In a maximum security yard? That was new. In the control room, officers debated, flipping through Daniel's file with tense energy. "It's a security issue," one of them insisted. "We don't bring animals in here, not on a regular day, and definitely not today." Another shook his head. "What's he gonna do, run? He's got 6 hours left." "Still, the risk." "Is nothing," Officer Harlan interrupted, voice softer than the others. He was older, near retirement, with eyes that carried too many endings. "He doesn't have anyone else. No visits, no letters, nothing." He paused. Let the man say goodbye to something. The room fell quiet. The warden reviewed Daniel's record again. In 7 years, Daniel had never caused a single problem. No fights, no contraband, no threats, no disciplinary notes at all. His behavior was the kind of spotless that made guards suspicious, the kind that inmates whisper. And there, on the last page of the file, Milo, brown and white mixed breed, seized during arrest, age approximate 3 at time. After a long exhale, the warden nodded. "Yard only. 10 minutes, strict supervision. That's all." Word spread through the prison before the ink dried on the authorization. Some guards scoffed at the sentimentality of it. Others softened at the idea of a man's final goodbye being with a creature who loved him without condition. Daniel, however, didn't think about what the guards were saying or how strange the request sounded. All he thought about was Milo. 7 years. Would the dog even remember him? Would he recognize his scent, his voice? Would he come to him or hesitate? The questions dug into him with each passing minute. He felt them in his chest, in the knot tightening in his throat, in the tremor in his hands. When the time came, 2 guards escorted him outside. The prison yard was eerily still, the cold air biting at his skin. A single plastic chair sat in the center of the yard. Beyond it stood the far gate, gray, rusted along the hinges, and heavier than it looked. Inmates watched from distant windows. Officers lined the perimeter, tense but quiet. Even the fluorescent lights seemed to hum differently. When the was 5 feet from the chair, his wrists cuffed loosely in front of him, more ceremonial than restrictive. He stared at the gate. His heart hammered. Then he heard the clank of the lock. The gate groaned open. For a moment nothing moved. The guards waited, hands hovering near their belts. Daniel exhaled slowly, the cold air burning his lungs. Then a brown and white blur appeared. Milo trotted in, ears perked, tail flicking uncertainly as he scanned the yard. 2 animal control officers walked at his sides, holding the leash tight, but even from a distance Daniel could see it. The moment Milo smelled him. The dog froze, head snapping forward, his tail lifted, his body vibrated with recognition so pure and immediate it hit Daniel like a punch to the chest. The officers hesitated, glancing at the warden. A small nod. The leash dropped. Milo bolted. Daniel fell to his knees just as Milo collided with him, front paws hitting his chest, muzzle burying against his neck, whining a sound split between joy and heartbreak. Daniel wrapped his arms around the aging dog, burying his face in the warm fur that smelled faintly of old grass and sunshine. For a moment the prison disappeared. No countdown, no death warrant, no steel and concrete, no chains, no eyes watching. Just a man and his dog, reunited after too many lost years. Daniel felt tears streak down his face as he whispered into Milo's fur, "You remember me. God, you remember me." He stroked the aging dog's back, feeling the stiffness in the joints, the softness of his muzzle now flecked with gray. Memory surged. Early morning walks, muddy paws on freshly cleaned floors, Milo resting his head on Daniel's lap during his worst nights. Then, suddenly, Milo's body stiffened. His tail froze mid-wag. His ears snapped forward. A deep, primal growl rumbled from his chest, vibrating against Daniel's ribs like a warning bell. Daniel tensed. He felt the growl before he heard it. Milo wasn't looking at him anymore. His gaze had locked, sharp, unblinking, on someone standing near the yard's edge. Officer Harrison, tall and expressionless, arms clasped behind him in rigid formality. The growl deepened, teeth flashing. Milo wasn't mistaken. He was reacting to something old, something buried, something dangerous. Daniel lifted a calming hand to Milo's back but spoke quietly, his voice barely more than breath. "What is it, boy?" Milo didn't blink, didn't move, didn't look away. Daniel's heartbeat pounded in his ears, because Milo had never reacted like that without a reason. And in a place where every moment mattered, a dog's instincts could unravel everything. Everything.
For a long, breathless moment, no one moved. The guards around the perimeter stiffened, hands inching toward their belts. The warden's jaw tightened. The officers who had brought Milo into the yard exchanged uneasy glances. Even the icy breeze seemed to halt mid-air, hanging between the man on his knees and the dog whose growl rumbled like distant thunder. But Milo didn't waver. His entire body was tense, every muscle angled toward Officer Harrison. the man who now stood absolutely still, staring back at the dog with an expression too carefully composed, too controlled, too empty. Daniel felt it. Something in Milo's reaction was rooted deep, primal, ancient. Dogs didn't growl like that without cause. Not Milo. Not the dog who had spent his life playing with kids in the neighborhood, licking the faces of strangers, curling up beside Daniel with a softness that soothed even the worst nights. This sound wasn't fear. It was recognition. Daniel placed a steady palm on Milo's back. "Hey, easy," he whispered. But Milo didn't ease. The growl only deepened, vibrating through his ribcage like a warning Daniel didn't yet understand. One of the guards muttered under his breath, "What the hell's gotten into the mutt?" "Quiet," the warden snapped without turning. Officer Harrison shifted slightly, but even that small motion made Milo's growl explode into a sharp bark, loud, aggressive, the kind of bark that shot adrenaline through everyone within hearing distance. 4 guards stepped forward instantly. "That's enough," one barked, reaching for the leash. Daniel rose to his feet slowly, gently but firmly holding Milo's collar. "I've got him," Daniel said, voice calm, steady, but with an urgency threading beneath the surface. "Don't touch him. He's just startled." The guards didn't believe him. They looked at the dog like he'd suddenly become a weapon. The warden held up a hand. "Let him handle it." Officer Harrison's face didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't so much as blink at the threat of a dog lunging at him. That stillness, so unnatural in the face of a dog ready to attack, sent an unexpected chill through Daniel. Something was wrong. Something was off. Something that went far beyond a dog's instinct. Daniel knelt beside Milo again, gripping the fur at his neck to keep him close. "Milo, hey boy. What's going on?" But Milo wasn't listening. His eyes remained locked on Harrison with a stare so sharp it felt like an accusation spoken without words. Daniel followed Milo's line of sight and studied Harrison more closely. Tall, rigid stance, clean uniform, but beneath all of that, something flickered, something hollow. Something that looked like fear and hatred held tightly behind a practiced mask. Milo's lip curled. Harrison finally spoke. "Get control of your dog, inmate." The words were cold, forced through teeth that barely parted. Daniel had heard that tone once before, from a man trying very hard not to show that he was rattled. "He's never acted like this," Daniel said. "A dog doesn't need a reason," Harrison snapped. But he was wrong. Dogs always had a reason. The warden stepped forward slightly. "Officer Harrison, is there a problem?" "No, sir," Harrison said quickly. "Just an animal acting out." Daniel saw it again. Another flicker, brief, but there. A twitch in the jaw, a shift in the eyes. Like the dog, Daniel recognized fear in other men. He'd worked around enough of them before prison. Milo suddenly lunged forward a small distance, barking again, a sharp, furious sound. 2 guards rushed in, panic bubbling over. "That's it, we're ending this." "Hold it," the warden commanded. But it was too late. One guard grabbed for Milo's collar, and Milo snapped. Not at the guard, at Harrison. It wasn't a bite. Daniel caught Milo's harness in time, but it was enough to send panic spiraling across the yard. "Restrain the animal," shouted a guard. The officers reached for tasers. Daniel threw his arms around Milo's neck, pulling him back, shielding him with his own body even though he was cuffed. "Stop! Don't you touch him!" His voice cracked, raw and frantic, dredging something primal from inside him. It wasn't fear of losing control. It wasn't even fear of punishment. It was fear that they would hurt the only living creature he loved. Harrison stepped back now, pale, jaw clenched so tight the muscle twitched beneath the skin. "Put the dog down. He's a threat." "He's not a threat," Daniel said, panting as he held Milo. "You know him, or he knows something about you." Harrison flinched.
And that tiny flinch changed everything, because Milo's growl deepened into something unmistakable. Recognition. Milo remembered something. Milo knew him. But how? Daniel's pulse hammered. He ran through the memories, every place he'd lived, every street Milo had walked, every yard dog Milo had met, every neighbor, every acquaintance. But Daniel had never met Harrison before. Or had he? Daniel's vision blurred briefly as a memory surged forward. A night from 7 years ago, a night he tried very hard not to remember, but that returned now like a blow to the chest. Milo barking, snarling, fighting against Daniel's grip. A man's voice shouting, glass breaking, sirens wailing, a flashlight beam slicing through darkness, a shape darting away, a door slamming. A memory Daniel had buried because no one had believed him, because the court had decided the version of events without ever considering the truth. Daniel swallowed hard. "Milo, do you know this man?" The dog's growl answered for him. Harrison stepped back again. Sweat prickled his forehead. The warden noticed. "Are you all right, Harrison?" "Yes," he snapped too quickly. "Fine." Daniel's heartbeat quickened. Milo wasn't reacting out of fear or confusion. This was a dog remembering a scent, a sound, a presence, a past. Something connected Harrison to the night everything went wrong. Daniel felt a crack of hope, or was it terror, tear through him? Milo had never forgotten, and maybe the past hadn't been buried as deep as everyone believed. Guards started closing in again, but the warden raised a hand. "Let Daniel calm the dog." Daniel lowered his forehead to Milo. "It's okay. I'm here. But why him? What did he do?" Milo's growl eased slightly, but his eyes stayed on Harrison, unblinking, resolute. Something flickered behind Daniel's ribs. A suspicion he had never dared allow himself. A possibility that felt dangerous to even think. Could Harrison have been there that night? Could Milo be remembering a man who vanished before the police arrived? Could everything, his trial, his conviction, his damnation, have been built on a lie? Harrison suddenly turned away. "Escort Ridgway inside. The visit is over." The warden frowned. "It hasn't been 10 minutes. "I said it's over," Harrison snapped. Daniel felt a surge of panic claw up his throat. "No," he protested, tightening his grip on Milo. "Wait! Milo is trying to—" Two guards stepped forward. "Time's up." They pulled Daniel back by the arms. Milo barked furiously, trying to follow, but animal control tightened a leash and wrestled him back.
"No!" Daniel shouted. "Let him— Milo, stop! Stay! Stay, boy!" Milo whined, then barked, desperate, fighting against the handlers with heartbreaking understanding. Daniel struggled too, twisting against the guards. "He's trying to tell us something. Please, just listen." But no one listened. As Daniel was dragged toward the gate, he locked eyes with Harrison one last time. The officer's face was white, too white. And Daniel knew, down to his bones, that Milo had recognized something no one else could see. And if Daniel was going to die today, he needed to know what, and fast.
The walk back to his cell felt different now. Every step echoed with a weight that had nothing to do with the shackles on his wrists. Daniel kept replaying Max's reaction in the yard, those guttural growls, the rigid stance, the laser-focused stare at Jenkins as if the dog had recognized something no one else could see. For years, Daniel had tried to accept the story the world told about him, that he was guilty, that the evidence was airtight, that justice had run its course. He had forced himself to swallow that narrative because it was the only way to survive. But Max's growl had cracked something open. The guards accompanying him said nothing. Ramirez walked slightly ahead, quiet and pensive, which wasn't unusual, but today Daniel sensed something off. Subtle tension in his posture, a stiffness in the way he avoided eye contact. Maybe Ramirez was shaken by the emotional reunion.
Maybe he was questioning the execution itself, or maybe Daniel hesitated even thinking it. Maybe he knew something. The thought passed quickly, but it didn't disappear. When they reached his cell, the door clanged shut behind him. The noise was harsher than usual, like the building itself was on edge. Daniel sat down on the cot slowly, elbows on his knees, palms pressed together. His pulse had steadied, but his mind hadn't. Max had been with him through everything, through late-night shifts fixing up old cars, through the breakup with Marissa, through the financial spiral that came before the accusations. Max had an instinct about people, an uncanny ability to read intentions, to sense things Daniel couldn't. That day in the yard, the dog hadn't been reacting out of confusion or excitement. It was something sharper, something familiar, something dangerous. A soft buzz crackled over the intercom, followed by the warden's voice announcing regular movement. Normal prison noise resumed. Doors slid open, then shut. Footsteps carried down the hall. But Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that beneath all that routine was a truth that had waited years to expose itself. He closed his eyes and let himself drift backward in time. The night of the murder. Cold rain, a poorly lit street, shouts, a crash. Police lights, blue and red chaos. Officers pulling him from the alley, slamming him against the hood of a cruiser. Blood on his hands that wasn't his. The victim, Caleb Turner, already gone. And Jenkins, younger then, stepping out of the shadows with a smirk that only now, in hindsight, carried a different meaning. Jenkins had testified Daniel was fleeing the scene, that he'd resisted, that he'd seen the knife near Daniel's boot. But Daniel had never resisted. He barely understood what was happening before he was pinned and cuffed. At the trial, the jury believed every word Jenkins spoke. A trusted officer, a decorated veteran, someone with a spotless record. But Daniel remembered something else too. Max had growled at Jenkins the night of the arrest, not viciously, just a low, uncertain rumble, the kind he used when a stranger came to the door smelling of anger or fear. He had dismissed it then, thinking it was just the chaos of the moment. He had been too overwhelmed to pay attention. Now, he wished he had. A loud knock jolted him back to the present. Ramirez stepped into view. "You need anything?" Ramirez asked, trying and failing to sound casual. Daniel studied him. "You saw Max. Dogs don't act like that for no reason." Ramirez hesitated, fingers drumming lightly on his belt. "He was unusual," he admitted, "but tension does strange things. All the noise, the guards, the chains. Maybe he was just scared." He wasn't scared. He was focused. Ramirez didn't argue. Instead, he pulled a small notebook from his pocket and scribbled something before sliding the paper through the bars. "Don't react," he whispered. Daniel's brows furrowed. He unfolded the scrap. Jenkins wasn't supposed to be in the yard today. He looked up sharply, but Ramirez was already walking away, boots echoing down the corridor. Daniel tucked the note beneath his thin mattress and exhaled slowly. The edges of fear and curiosity began to twist together, forming something dangerous, suspicion with direction. He stood and began pacing the cell, hands behind his back. Jenkins had avoided making eye contact during the reunion. Why? Why come to the yard at that exact moment? And why did Max react like the man was a threat? The door to the hallway buzzed open again, louder this time. Daniel stepped closer to the bars instinctively. He heard raised voices, guards arguing, something about protocol and breaking ranks. Daniel strained to catch more, but the voices moved down the hall quickly. Minutes later, a guard he rarely saw appeared carrying a small folder. He unlocked Daniel's door just enough to hand it to him, then stepped back without a word. The guard's eyes flicked to the security camera before he disappeared. Daniel stared at the folder. It was standard issue, no name on the front, nothing to indicate why it had been given to him. Inside were photocopies of old reports, some he recognized, some he had never seen. He sat on his cot and began reading. The first page was a record from the night of his arrest, the police incident report. Except this version had handwritten notes on the margin, questions, doubts, one line circled twice. Officer Jenkins arrived on scene before backup, undocumented in dispatch logs. Daniel's breath hitched. Another page revealed inconsistencies in Jenkins' sworn statement. Another had timestamps that didn't line up with the surveillance footage the jury had been shown. And at the bottom of the stack was something that chilled him. Anonymous tip. The officer knew the victim. Filed, never investigated. He wiped a hand across his forehead. These were not small errors. These were intentional omissions, fabrications, lies. The last page wasn't a report at all. It was a photograph. A grainy snapshot of Jenkins meeting with a man in a hooded jacket behind an old warehouse. The timestamp, 2 days before Caleb Turner was killed. And on the back, in neat handwriting, you weren't supposed to take the fall. The walls of the cell seemed to close in around him. He forced himself to breathe. Slow in, slow out. The prison hummed with distant noise, radios crackling, guards chatting, someone yelling for medical down the hall. But inside the cell, everything went silent. Max had known. His dog had recognized the man responsible for the life Daniel had lost, the years stolen, the future ripped away. Dogs didn't understand trials. They didn't understand justice, but they understood people. Their instincts were clean, untainted by lies or politics. Max had seen the truth. He pressed the back of his head against the cold wall and closed his eyes. 7 years. 7 years of believing the world had made up its mind about him. 7 years of trying to accept a fate built on a foundation of deceit. Now, with less than a day left to live, the truth had begun to bleed through the cracks. But why now? Why give him these documents? Who was helping him? And what were they risking to do it? As he struggled to make sense of it, a sudden sharp sound, metal on metal, rang from the end of the corridor. Guards rushed past his cell. Daniel moved to the bars for a better look. 2 officers were escorting Jenkins down the hallway. Jenkins's usual stoic posture was gone. He looked rattled, pale, sweating. He muttered something to the guards, but they only tightened their grip. Jenkins's eyes briefly flicked towards Daniel's cell. His expression wasn't anger. It was fear. Daniel stepped back instinctively. Something was unraveling far faster than he expected. And Max, the dog who loved him without condition, had just torn open the first thread.
The hallway fell quiet after Jenkins disappeared around the corner, but the lingering tension clung to the air like humidity before a storm. Daniel remained by the bars long after the echo of footsteps faded, mind racing, breaths shallow. Fear wasn't new to him, not after 7 years of living in a place built on it, but this was different. This was fear that carried direction, purpose, the kind that sharpened instead of paralyzing. He returned to the cot, pulled out the folder, and studied the pages again. The handwritten margin notes, the circled inconsistencies, the photograph. None of it should have made it into his hands. Someone was violating protocol, risking their job and possibly their life. And for what? To show a condemned man a glimpse of a truth he might not live long enough to use? Daniel rubbed his thumb over the corner of the photo. Jenkins and the hooded man. Grainy but recognizable enough to confirm Jenkins had been hiding more than anyone realized. The idea that this image existed meant 2 possibilities. The corruption tied to his case ran deeper than a rogue officer, or someone up the chain had kept evidence buried. His stomach tightened. The intercom buzzed. Cell 118, stand by for movement. Stand by. Not prepare, not remain. Stand by meant unexpected activity. Daniel had lived here long enough to recognize the coded tones in the guards' voices. The door slid open moments later. Ramirez stood outside, jaw clenched, expression unreadable. 2 other guards flanked him, Dobbs and Carter,
both stone-faced, both avoiding Daniel's eyes. "Move," Dobbs barked. Daniel stepped forward, hands out to be cuffed. The metal clicked cold around his wrists, and he followed them into the hallway. The walk felt longer than usual, the fluorescent lights flickering overhead as if the building itself sensed the shift. They stopped in front of a door Daniel had never been through, the administrative conference room. It wasn't used for inmates, at least not publicly. Ramirez opened the door, and Daniel was ushered inside. The room was small but polished, walls lined with framed commendations, a long table, and a humming security camera fixed in the corner. And at the head of the table sat Warden Hale, fingers steepled, face carved in stone. Next to him stood Jenkins. Daniel's heart punched his ribs. Jenkins looked even worse up close, sweat beading at his temples, shoulders stiff, eyes shifting like he was standing on the edge of a cliff. Hale noticed Daniel's glance. "Sit," the warden said. Daniel sat. The cuffs stayed on. Hale leaned back. "We have a problem." No greeting, no explanation, just those 4 words. Daniel didn't respond. He wanted to hear where this was going. Jenkins shifted slightly, opening his mouth to speak, but Hale cut him off with a raised hand. "You'll speak when I tell you to." A long silence followed. The security camera's soft click-click as it refocused was loud in the stillness. "You had your reunion with the dog. Unexpected as the reaction was, it created complications." Daniel's mind flashed to Max's growl, the way he'd stared at Jenkins with a recognition that ran deeper than memory. Max hadn't been reacting to a stranger. He'd been reacting to a threat. "What kind of complications?" Daniel asked quietly. Jenkins stiffened again, jaw clenching. Hale's eyes narrowed. "Officer Jenkins," the warden said, voice dangerously calm, "was not scheduled to be in the yard. He altered his post assignment without notifying command. When questioned, he could not provide a valid explanation. That alone is a breach of protocol." Daniel let the words sit. Jenkins' gaze was locked on the table, refusing to rise. Hale continued, "Then you received documents." Ramirez stiffened in Daniel's peripheral vision. Dobbs and Carter exchanged a glance. Hale fixed his stare on Daniel. "Would you like to tell me how you obtained them?" Daniel met his gaze calmly. "They were handed to me." "By whom?" Daniel didn't answer. He wasn't about to expose the one person who had shown him even a sliver of humanity. Hale exhaled through his nose. "I'll find out, one way or another." He motioned to Jenkins. "Stand." Jenkins stood slowly. The sleeves of his uniform were rolled back just enough for Daniel to notice faint scratches on his forearm, fresh, reddened. Max had lunged, not fully, but enough for his paws to catch skin. That explained the stiff posture, the avoidance. Hale turned to Jenkins. "I reviewed your report from the night of the arrest. Official logs, dispatch recordings, your testimony. All clean on paper." "But," Daniel prompted, "but clean doesn't always mean truthful." Jenkins' head snapped up, eyes wide. "Sir, be quiet." Daniel watched him swallow hard. He looked nothing like the confident officer who had testified against him 7 years ago. Something was unraveling beneath his uniform. Hale opened a folder on the table and pulled out a set of papers, copies of the same ones Daniel had in his cell. "Explain this," Hale ordered. Jenkins' hands trembled slightly as he picked up the top page. His eyes scanned the scribbled margin notes, the circled inconsistencies, the photograph. His Adam's apple bobbed. I don't... I shook his head. "I never wrote any of this." "I didn't say you did," Hale replied. "But someone did, and they had access to internal files." Daniel watched the exchange carefully. Hale wasn't defending Jenkins. He was probing him. "What were you doing meeting with a civilian 2 days before the Turner homicide?" Jenkins' breath hitched. That was the first visible crack. I told Internal Affairs. You told them nothing, Hale snapped, because the meeting was never disclosed. Jenkins licked his lips. His voice dropped to a near whisper. Sir, I can explain. Hale folded his hands. Then do it. Jenkins seemed to shrink. His eyes flicked to Daniel for the briefest moment, just long enough to confirm something Daniel had suspected. Guilt. Real and heavy. It wasn't supposed to happen like that, Jenkins finally said, voice shaking. I was supposed to... Look, I was trying to help someone. The kid, he owed money. They said, words tangled, I didn't think it would turn into a murder. Every guard in the room stilled. Daniel's chest tightened. What kid? Jenkins' breathing quickened. Turner. He got caught up with the wrong people. I was trying to keep it quiet, keep him safe, but then things got out of control. Daniel leaned forward. And you pinned it on me? Jenkins squeezed his eyes shut. You were there. Wrong place, wrong time. They told me if I didn't name someone else, the Turner family wouldn't be the only ones to get hurt. I didn't know what else to do. You lied under oath, Hale growled. Jenkins' shoulders sagged. Yes, sir. And you let an innocent man rot in a cell for 7 years. Jenkins' voice cracked. I'm sorry. The words meant nothing. They fell dead in the room, hollow and too late. Hale stood slowly, pushing his chair back with a screech that made everyone flinch. You're done, he said to Jenkins. Escort him to holding. He won't be returning to duty. As Dobbs and Carter moved in, Jenkins' panic erupted. He's not safe, Jenkins yelled as pointing at Daniel as the guards grabbed his arms. You don't understand. If they know he's talking, if they know he saw that photo, them coming for him is already in motion. Ramirez went rigid. Hale's face darkened. Who's coming? But Jenkins didn't answer. Or rather, he couldn't. Carter forced him out the door, his shouts echoing down the hall until they were swallowed by distance. The door slammed shut. Silence fell. Hale turned to Daniel, expression somber. It appears your case isn't closed, after all. Daniel exhaled slowly. No triumph, no satisfaction, just a cold, creeping dread. If Jenkins was right, then someone far more dangerous than a corrupt officer was now aware of the truth resurfacing. And they were coming. Not tomorrow, not after his execution. Now. We're in, Ramirez said quietly. We need to move him. Yes, Hale agreed. Before anyone else makes their move.
For the first time in 7 years, Daniel's execution wasn't the biggest threat to his life. The truth was,
the moment the door shut behind Jenkins, the atmosphere inside the conference room shifted. Something raw and volatile hung in the air. Fear, betrayal, and the sickening awareness that the walls of the prison were no longer the only threat closing in on Daniel. The guards looked shaken in a way Daniel had never seen. Even Warden Hale, a man carved from granite and procedure, looked as if the ground beneath him had tilted. Ramirez was the first to break the silence. Warden, if what Jenkins said is true, we've already lost control of the situation. Hale didn't respond immediately. His jaw shifted, grinding slightly, as he stared at the now empty doorway like Jenkins might come running back with more to confess. But the hallway remained silent. Finally, Hale spoke. Get him back to his cell. Double escort. No stops. No conversation. Dobbs and Carter moved to flank Daniel. Ramirez hesitated. Sir, are we sure his cell is the safest place? Hale's eyes flicked toward Daniel. No, he admitted, but until I know where the leak is coming from, I can't trust anywhere else. Daniel didn't argue. It wouldn't help. He rose quietly, letting the guards take him by the arms, letting them lead him down the hall toward the row of cells. But as they walked, he noticed something he hadn't seen earlier. More guards than usual. Not patrolling, not talking. Positioning. Watching. As if the building had collectively inhaled and wasn't sure how to breathe anymore. The prison, normally loud with shouts, metal clanks, and echoes, seemed muted. Conversations died the moment Daniel passed. Doors that were usually open were shut. Every guard wore the same tight expression, a blend of wariness and something darker. Something like anticipation. Something was happening behind the scenes, and Daniel was now at the epicenter. When they reached his cell, Dobbs scanned the corridor twice before unlocking the door. "Inside," he muttered. Daniel stepped in. The bars slid shut with a much heavier clang than usual. For a moment, no one moved. Then Carter cleared his throat. "Keep your head down, kid." Kid. It was the first time Carter had ever used a word that wasn't stripped of humanity. Carter stepped closer to the bars. Whatever Jenkins was talking about, he wasn't making it up. Dobbs shot him a warning look. But Carter didn't stop. People disappear over this kind of thing. Officers, civilians, whole files wiped. You're not supposed to be alive long enough to tell anyone what he said. Dobbs hissed under his breath. "Shut it, Carter." "I'm serious," Carter snapped, then leaned in. "You need to be ready." "For what?" Daniel asked quietly. Carter stared at him, jaw clenching twice before he answered. "For them to make sure the execution happens early." Dobbs grabbed his arm and yanked him back. "Enough!" The two guards turned and walked quickly down the hall, their voices dropping to an urgent argument as they disappeared from sight. Daniel sat on his cot, elbows on his knees, hands clasped, breathing slowly through the panic clawing at his throat. They were accelerating his execution, not because the system demanded it, but because someone outside the system feared what he now knew. His mind raced through memories of the trial, the missing evidence, the way the prosecution had seemed almost rehearsed. The night of the arrest, Jenkins had shown up too quickly, too ready. And now? Now the pieces were taking shape. He had been silenced before, and they were coming to silence him again. Hours passed, or maybe only minutes. Time bent strangely when fear curled around it. A faint scraping sound broke the monotony. Paper sliding under the bars. Daniel stiffened. He reached down and picked up a folded note. 3 words. "Cell transfer tonight." He closed his eyes, heart pounding. Someone was helping him again. But who? Ramirez? A clerk? Someone hidden in the shadows of this place, risking everything? Whoever it was, they were risking their life to warn him. He refolded the paper, sliding it beneath the mattress just as footsteps echoed down the hallway. These footsteps were different. Heavy, unhurried, intentional. Jenkins had walked like a man with secrets. These sounded like men with orders. Daniel rose slowly. Through the bars he saw 4 guards approaching, none of them familiar. Black tactical gear. No rank patches. No names. His blood chilled. Not standard prison officers. Outside contractors. The warden hadn't called them. Someone else had. The lead guard stopped in front of Daniel's cell. "Inmate Daniel Reeves, you are scheduled for relocation." Relocation, a euphemism used only when the transfer wasn't being logged. Daniel didn't move. "I haven't been notified." "You have now." The guard gestured to the others, who began unlocking the door with a key Daniel had never seen before. Longer, older, almost ceremonial. Not standard issue. Someone high up had authorized this. "Let's go," the man said. Daniel didn't have a choice. He stepped forward and the cuffs snapped around his wrists. But as they began to walk him down the hall, Ramirez appeared at the far end. "Hold it!" The guards didn't stop. Ramirez hurried toward them. "That transfer is not on the board. Warden didn't authorize this." The lead contractor turned, face expressionless. Orders came from above the warden. Ramirez's jaw tightened. There is no above the warden protocol for inmate movement. There is today. It happened fast. One of the men reached for Ramirez's arm. Ramirez slapped it away. "Touch me again and I guarantee—" Another guard drew a baton. Ramirez ducked back, fists coming up. "Stop!" Warden Hale's voice thundered down the hall. Every head whipped toward him. The warden's face was flushed, and for the first time since Daniel had known him, he looked genuinely furious. "Who authorized this?" Hale demanded. "Director Harlan," the lead guard said. "Effective immediately." Hale's expression changed at the name. Shock, then fury, then something else. Fear. "He doesn't have the authority," Hale said through clenched teeth. "He does now." Ramirez stepped beside the warden. "Sir, they're not following procedure, they're—" "I know exactly what they're doing," Hale muttered. Then he turned to Daniel. And the look in his eyes confirmed everything. Daniel wasn't being moved. He was being erased. Hale took a breath. "Inmate Daniel Reeves is under my custody. He does not move without my signature, and I am not signing off." "You don't have a choice," the lead said. 4 batons came up. Hale's hands curled into fists. Ramirez stepped forward. "Sir—" "Stand down," whispered Hale. "They want an excuse." Daniel's heart hammered. He felt the tension in the air thicken until it was almost suffocating. These men weren't here to argue. They were here to finish what someone else started years ago. The lead guard stepped toward Daniel. "Move!" Daniel didn't move. The contractor grabbed his arm. And that's when the alarm went off. A shrill, violent wail that vibrated the walls. Every guard froze. Ramirez swore. "Someone triggered lockdown!" The contractors exchanged sharp looks. Hale's eyes widened. "That wasn't me." The intercom crackled. A distorted voice shouted, "Reeves stays where he is! All units stand down! This is a direct order!" The contractors stiffened. Ramirez blinked. Whose voice was that? Hale exhaled shakily. "Someone who outranks Harlan." Daniel stared at the ceiling speaker. Someone was fighting for him. But someone else was fighting harder. Sirens blared, boots thundered, and chaos erupted. The fallout had begun. And Daniel was right in the middle of a war he didn't understand yet.
The sirens shrieked with a relentless urgency, reverberating through every concrete corner of the penitentiary. Red emergency lights flashed in stuttering bursts, painting the hallway in violent shades of warning. The contractors tightened formation instinctively, their hands drifting toward batons and tasers, their discipline suddenly shaken. Daniel felt his pulse slam against his ribs. That voice over the intercom, firm, commanding, unmistakably powerful, had cut through the chaos like a blade, and whoever it belonged to had just neutralized the men who were supposed to erase him. For a moment, no one dared move. Then the PA crackled again. "All units freeze. Await instructions. This is not a drill." The lead contractor's jaw twitched. He turned sharply to his team. "We move now, lockdown or not." Ramirez stepped forward. "You heard the order. We don't take orders from the prison," the contractor snapped. Hale's voice rose, low but dangerous. "You do today." In that split second, Daniel realized something. Hale didn't know who had spoken, and if he didn't know, then no one inside this prison was truly in control. The lights flickered again. A second alarm began, a deeper, vibrating tone used only when the internal system had been breached. "Someone's in the command room. Someone with access," Ramirez muttered. The contractors stiffened, exchanging uneasy glances. Their confidence faltered. Their plan, whatever it had been, was unraveling faster than they could hide it.
Hale pointed at Daniel. "Inside the cell. Now." Daniel didn't argue. He hurried inside just as the door slammed shut. This time, the lock engaged with an extra mechanism, a manual override Hale rarely used. "That should hold," Hale muttered. But none of them looked reassured. Not when footsteps, hurried, heavy, tense, began echoing from the far corridor. Prison guards. Real ones. Ramirez exhaled sharply, relief flickering across his face. But Hale didn't look relieved. He looked worried. "Ramirez," he whispered, "something's wrong." The group of guards rounding the corner moved too quietly, too smoothly. They weren't shouting commands. They weren't calling out codes or updates. They weren't reacting to chaos. No. These men walked with purpose, calculated, focused. They weren't responding to the alarm. They were answering the signal. The contractors stiffened, hands drifting to weapons. Hale cursed under his breath. Then, like two storms colliding, the guards and contractors faced each other in the hallway, forming a silent battlefield. For a few long seconds, neither group moved. Finally, the lead contractor spoke. "This is our operation. Step aside." The guard in front, Officer Laramie, stern, muscular, eyes like polished steel, lifted his chin. Not anymore. The air snapped with tension. Daniel pressed closer to the bars, heart thundering. He didn't understand what was happening, but he understood one thing. These men weren't fighting over him. They were fighting over whatever he represented. A secret too big for one faction to control. One group wanted him silenced. The other group wanted him preserved. The contractor's leader narrowed his eyes. "Director Harlan authorized us." Laramie smirked. "Funny, because the order we got outranks Harlan." Contractors exchanged glances. Hale looked stunned, but Ramirez whispered, "Who the hell outranks the director?" Laramie answered without taking his eyes off the opposing force. "Federal oversight." Ramirez's breath caught. Feds? They're getting involved? Daniel felt the world tilt beneath him. Why would federal oversight intervene unless Jenkins' confession had exposed something massive, some conspiracy buried in the case files, something powerful enough that federal agents were stepping into a prison without warning? The next words from Laramie confirmed it. "Reeves is no longer under state jurisdiction." Hale's eyes widened, fury and disbelief mixing violently. What jurisdiction, then? Federal protective interest. Protective. Not punitive. Not execution. Protective. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. Someone important wanted him alive, and someone equally important wanted him dead. The contractors surged forward. "You don't have the authority to countermand an execution order." "We do," Laramie said coolly, "and it's already been done." The contractors froze. Hale turned sharply. "Explain, now." Laramie lifted a folded paper from his vest, an official document sealed with a gold emblem. Federal injunction, effective immediately. Execution stayed. Daniel's knees buckled. He gripped the bars, the air knocked out of him. His execution. Cancelled. Just like that? Hale snatched the paper, scanning every line. "This signature, this can't be real." "It is," Laramie said. "On what grounds?" Hale demanded. Laramie met his gaze steadily. "New evidence, compromised testimony, potential deliberate misconduct in the original investigation." Ramirez swore under his breath. The contractors stepped forward. "We're not done here." "You are now," Laramie responded. Chaos erupted. The two forces clashed in a violent burst of shouts, metal and bodies slamming into walls. Batons cracked against batons, grunts and curses echoed down the hall. Hale pulled Ramirez back from the melee, shouting orders no one could hear over the brawl. Daniel stepped back, gripping the bars as fists flew and weapons clattered. He wasn't watching a fight. He was watching a war between two sides fighting over whether he lived or died. In the middle of the chaos, one of the contractors broke through the line. He sprinted toward Daniel's cell, hand reaching for something at his belt. A knife. Ramirez spotted him. "Daniel, move!" Daniel stumbled backwards, just as the man hurled forward, eyes wild with intent. The contractor's blade arced toward the bars, but a body crashed into him from the side. Laramie tackled the man to the ground, wrenching the knife away and slamming cuffs around his wrists. "You're done," Laramie barked. The contractor spat blood. You have no idea what you're stepping into. Laramie leaned close. Neither do you. One by one, the contractors were restrained, disarmed, pinned to the floor. The hallway fell back into tense, ragged silence. Ramirez's chest heaved. Hale's face was ashen. Laramie turned to them. We move Reeves now. Secure transport is already en route. Daniel blinked. Where are you taking me? Somewhere safe. Why? Daniel demanded. What is happening? Why me? Laramie studied him for a long moment. Because, he said finally, you were never supposed to die. You were supposed to disappear quietly. Someone high up wanted that, but someone even higher decided to stop it. Daniel swallowed hard. Who? Laramie didn't answer. Instead, he stepped closer to the bars. Tell me something, he said softly. 7 years ago, did you ever wonder why your trial moved so fast? Why evidence went missing? Why certain testimonies were rushed? Daniel's jaw clenched. Every day. Laramie nodded. Good. Because the world is finally starting to ask those same questions. Ramirez unlocked the cell. Let's go, Reeves. Daniel stepped out, surrounded by guards, not to drag him to death, but to protect him. As they escorted him down the hall, he heard one last sentence from Laramie, spoken under his breath, but loud enough to echo in his bones. Someone on the outside sent that dog for a reason. Daniel froze. What do you mean? Laramie gave a thin, knowing smile. You think it was luck Max got out. Luck he made it here today. Luck he sensed Jenkins. Luck he reacted when he did. Daniel's pulse roared in his ears. Someone made sure your dog survived, Laramie whispered. Someone made sure he found you. Who? Daniel breathed. Laramie didn't turn around as he began walking again. That, he said, is what we're going to find out.
The transport van rumbled through the night like a steel animal trying to shake apart. The interior lights had been shut off, leaving Daniel in shadow. His wrists were cuffed, though not brutally, standard federal procedure. But the real restraint was the uncertainty knotted deep inside him. Across from him sat Laramie and 2 more federal officers, all stone-faced, all unreadable in the dark. Rain tapped the roof with sporadic intensity, like impatient fingers drumming out a warning. No one had spoken since they'd left the penitentiary, not even Laramie, whose silence felt deliberate, measured. Daniel sensed the weight of something simmering under the calm exterior, something bigger than any of them were prepared to admit. Finally, Daniel broke the quiet. You said someone sent my dog, Max. How do you know that? Laramie didn't look at him right away. He kept his gaze on the narrow slit of a window where occasional flashes of lightning lit up the world outside. Then, without turning fully, he said, Because I've seen this pattern before. What pattern? Laramie shifted forward, elbows resting on his knees. Selective interference. Precise timing. A single protective variable introduced into an otherwise airtight plan. Daniel's brows furrowed. And by protective variable, you mean a dog? He means anything or anyone deliberately inserted to disrupt an outcome, something that appears natural but isn't, something the architects of your conviction didn't see coming until it was too late. Daniel stared at him, stunned. You're saying Max was planted? Not planted, redirected. How? Lightning flashed again, illuminating Laramie's face, solemn, serious. Max didn't break loose by accident. Someone picked the lock on his kennel. Someone set his path. Someone ensured he reached you at exactly the right moment. Who would do that? Daniel pressed. Laramie sat back. With high-level access. Someone with a vested interest in keeping you alive. But why? Why me? That's what we're trying to understand. The van hit a bump. Daniel felt the jolt travel up his spine. Laramie reached into his jacket and pulled out a manila envelope. He slid it across the metal bench to Daniel. Open it. Daniel hesitated, then picked it up awkwardly with cuffed hands. Inside were several glossy photos, and as soon as he saw the first one,
He felt the breath leave his lungs. It was Jenkins. But not disheveled, panicking, or cornered like the man who'd confessed only hours earlier. This Jenkins was clean-cut, professional, wearing a suit tailored enough to suggest someone else paid for it. He stood beside men Daniel didn't recognize, men in conference rooms, men in unmarked buildings, men whose faces were always turned away from the camera. What am I looking at? Documents we intercepted, digitally, quietly. Jenkins wasn't acting alone. He was part of a larger structure. Daniel stared at the photos. So you're saying there was a conspiracy? We're not calling it anything yet, but yes, there are indicators of organized interference in your case. Your trial was rushed, evidence mislabeled, witnesses guided. You became a convenient target. Why? We don't have a full picture. But whatever it was, someone didn't want it exposed. When Jenkins came forward tonight, everything changed. Daniel clutched the photos. And that's why someone tried to get to me? Yes. And why someone else tried to stop them? Yes. Daniel felt dizzy. None of this makes sense. It will, Laramie assured him. But you need to understand something. The moment you lived past tonight, everything escalated. There are forces that see you as a liability, others see you as leverage, and a smaller, more dangerous group sees you as the key. The key to what? Laramie didn't answer, because the van suddenly swerved, hard. The tires screeched, a thunderous impact slammed them sideways. Daniel flew against the wall, pain ricocheting through his ribs. The lights flickered, metal crunched like a beast in agony. "Brace!" one of the agents yelled. Another hit, then another. The van spun, skidding off the road. The world became a blur of rain-streaked darkness and violent motion as the vehicle tipped, rolled, and finally landed on its side with a deafening crash. Silence, broken only by the ticking of the engine and the distant wail of wind. Daniel's ears rang. His wrists burned from the cuffs. Laramie groaned, pinned under another officer. "Everyone okay?" he croaked. One agent didn't respond. The one closest to Daniel shoved debris aside, coughing. "Ambush!" "Ambush by who?" Laramie pushed himself upright, grabbing Daniel's arm. "Get ready. They're going to breach the vehicle." As if summoned by his words, metallic clinks sounded on the outside. Hooks, then grinding metal. They were cutting through the doors. Laramie drew a firearm from his ankle holster. The remaining agent mirrored him. "Reeves, listen to me. Whatever happens, do not let them take you. Do you understand?" Daniel nodded, his breath shaky. "Who are they?" "Not ours. Not the state's either. Private sector. Contracted. Someone with money and authority hired them to intercept us, and they're not here for negotiation." Daniel felt his stomach knot. "So, what do we do?" "We survive." The metal door ripped free, crashing into the wet asphalt. Figures in black tactical gear peered inside. Masks, night vision lenses, no insignia, no identifiers. The first one stepped in. Laramie fired immediately. The attacker dropped. Another stepped in, then another. Gunfire exploded in the confined space, deafening, blinding, overwhelming. Sparks flew as bullets ricocheted off steel. The van shook from the force of the assault. The second agent was hit. He collapsed without a sound. Laramie dragged Daniel behind the seat, shielding him with his body. "Stay down." Daniel's heart hammered. "We need to get out." "We will," Laramie growled, firing another round. Just a flash grenade detonated inside the van. White light swallowed everything. Daniel's ears exploded with sound, his vision fragmenting into incoherent shapes. He felt hands grabbing him, pulling him. He struggled, but the cuffs made him clumsy. He heard Laramie shouting, muffled, distant, then a sickening thud. Darkness threatened to drag Daniel under. But another set of hands seized him, rougher, stronger, not attackers. A voice yelled over the chaos, urgent, hard-edged, familiar. "Get him out! Now! Daniel blinked through the haze, trying to focus. He knew that voice. He couldn't place it, but he knew it. The men pulling him weren't the attackers. They were opposing them. Their gear was different, their stance different, their precision different. Two factions, fighting over him. Again. One of the rescuers cut Daniel's cuffs with a small bolt cutter. "Move!" Daniel stumbled out of the broken van, rain stinging his face. Gunfire cracked through the night. Shadows battled shadows. A man grabbed Daniel's arm and turned him sharply. And Daniel froze. Because the man standing in front of him, wearing federal-grade tactical gear, breathing hard, bleeding from a cut across his eyebrow, was someone he never expected to see again. A ghost from before his conviction. Someone he once trusted. Someone who vanished the night everything fell apart. "Daniel," the man said, gripping his shoulders. "We don't have time. You need to come with me." Daniel's voice trembled. You're supposed to be dead!" The man gave a humorless smile. "Not yet, and neither are you, if you move." Daniel stared at him, disbelief choking words. "Why? Why are you here?" Another explosion rocked the night, sending debris flying. The man pulled Daniel toward a waiting SUV. "Because, Daniel, they lied to both of us, and tonight, everything starts coming out." Daniel stumbled after him, rain and gunfire blending into chaos. The turning point wasn't the escape. It was the realization dawning in Daniel's mind. He wasn't just the victim of a corrupt case. He had been the center of a war he didn't even know existed. And the man dragging him to safety was about to tell him why.
The SUV tore down the flooded service road, tires slicing through puddles that exploded into silver spray behind them. Daniel sat in the back seat, soaked, bruised, and breathless, staring at the man driving as if he were looking at a ghost. Because in a way, he was. Aaron Cole, former detective, his closest friend before the world imploded, the man whose disappearance 7 years ago had triggered everything that came after, the man who was said to have died in a warehouse explosion the same night Daniel was arrested. Yet here he was. Alive, scarred, hardened, but undeniably real. Daniel swallowed hard. "How is this possible? I saw the reports. I went to your memorial." Aaron kept his eyes on the road, knuckles white around the wheel. "Those reports were written by the same people who set you up. The explosion, the memorial, the body bag, they were all staged. I was extracted and buried. Not literally, but close enough." Daniel shook his head. "Why? Who would do that?" "The ones who needed both of us gone. You because you got too close to something you weren't supposed to see. Me because I was the only one who believed you." Daniel felt a chill crawl through his spine. "Believed me about what?" Aaron didn't answer immediately. The SUV veered onto an unmarked dirt road, shielded by towering pines and thick fog. The deeper they went, the more the world behind them felt unreal. Like the prison, the gunfire, the overturned van were scenes from a nightmare he was still waking up from. Finally, the car rolled to a stop in front of an abandoned ranger station, half eaten by moss and moonlight. Aaron turned to face him. "The night before your arrest," he said quietly, "you came to me with something dangerous. Do you remember?" Daniel frowned. "All I remember is waking up in a cell, handcuffed with blood I couldn't explain, and questions no one would answer." Aaron studied him. "You really don't remember?" Daniel shook his head. "Nothing after going to your place. The whole night is a blur." Aaron exhaled, the sound full of resignation and grief. "They wiped it." "Wiped what?" "Your memory. Not fully. Just a surgical cut. One night, a few hours, gone." Aaron stepped out of the SUV and motioned for Daniel to follow. "Come inside. You need to see something." Daniel hesitated, but Max, who had been rescued with them, tail thumping anxiously, nudged his hand, urging him forward.
The three entered the ranger station. Inside, flickering lanterns illuminated dusty maps, metal cabinets, and a table strewn with documents that looked older than both of them. Aaron picked up a file and handed it to Daniel. "This is what you brought me that night." Daniel opened the folder and felt the world tilt. Inside were blueprints, name lists, transfer logs, all tied to a subsidiary of the same corporation that funded the private prisons in the state, all connected to a secret program, an off-the-books initiative designed to manipulate inmate transfers, falsify behavioral records, and funnel selected individuals into specific facilities. People who were poor, people who lacked support, people who wouldn't be missed. Daniel's voice became a fragile whisper. This is human trafficking?" Aaron nodded once. "State-sanctioned, corporately funded, hidden under layers of bureaucracy." "And I've found this?" "You stumbled onto it. An old case led to a newer case, and before you knew it, everything connected. You realized people were disappearing. You were smart enough to see the pattern, smart enough to bring it to me." Daniel's hands trembled. "So that night, Aaron said you came to my apartment terrified. Someone was following you. You had already hidden the only copy of the files you stole, except for these summaries. Before we could take it to the DA..." He paused. The silence stretched, heavy as stone. "They hit us," Aaron finished. Daniel felt his heart drop. "Hit us?" Aaron pointed to a scar running from his neck down to his collarbone. "I was nearly killed. You were knocked out and drugged. They staged the murder, staged everything. And because the files implicated high-ranking officials and private investors, you needed to disappear too." Daniel staggered back. "So they framed me? For murder? To silence me?" "Yes. And Jenkins was part of the operation. Small part. His guilt made him unravel over the years. Max, your dog, was the only reason the truth cracked open. He recognized Jenkins. That wasn't coincidence. He remembered the night you were taken." Daniel felt sick. "I didn't even know what I'd lost." Aaron placed a hand on his shoulder. "Now you do." Daniel's mind raced. His sentence, his appeals, his mother dying believing he was a killer. 7 years of rot inside cold walls, all because he uncovered something someone powerful didn't want seen. So what now? What's the point of knowing if I'm still a fugitive, if they still want me dead? Aaron didn't answer with words. He opened a drawer, pulled out a flash drive, placed it in Daniel's palm. "This contains everything," he said. "Your original files, backup copies, Jenkins' signed confession, witness statements we forced out of hiding, a full chain of evidence. Enough to take down the entire operation, if we play it right." Daniel stared at him. You've had all this for years?" "I had fragments, but pulling you out tonight completed the picture. We now have the missing link. Your testimony, your memory, and the one thing they never expected. Survival." Daniel tightened his grip around the drive. "And if I testify, this could expose all of them." Aaron nodded once, every last one. Daniel looked down at Max, who sat patiently by his side, tail sweeping the floor as if sensing the gravity of the moment. "Why now? Why did you wait all these years to come back?" Aaron's eyes softened. "Because survival is timing and opportunity. Tonight, for the first time in 7 years, the balance shifted. Jenkins talked, you lived, the undercover teams were in place, and someone on the inside, someone higher than me, sent Max into that prison yard knowing he was the spark that would force the truth out." Daniel blinked. "Someone on the inside?" Aaron nodded. "One day you'll meet her." Daniel swallowed hard. "So this is it? My choice." Aaron stepped back, giving him space. "It always was." Daniel looked out the cracked window.
Dawn was breaking, a thin line of gold threading through the dark clouds. A new day, a new chance. He felt the weight of his life pressing down on him. The years lost, the pain endured, the people hurt, the truth buried. Yet, here he was, alive. With the dog who had never given up on him. With a friend who had returned from the dead. With proof powerful enough to burn an empire to the ground. Daniel closed his eyes. Then he made his decision. "We take them down," he said quietly. "All of them." Aaron's expression didn't change, but his eyes did. A flicker of relief, of resolve, of the brotherhood they once had. He nodded. "Then we move now." They left the ranger station. Max trotted ahead, ears alert, as if guiding them forward. The SUV rumbled back to life. The road ahead was long, treacherous, full of threats, but for the first time in 7 years, Daniel felt something warm in his chest. Something familiar. Hope. As they pulled onto the main road, Aaron dialed a number on a secure phone. "It's done," he said when the call connected. "He's in." A woman's voice answered, calm, controlled. "Good. Bring him in. The real fight starts today." The line disconnected. Daniel didn't ask who she was. Not yet. He simply sat back, Max's head resting on his knee, and watched the sunrise break across the horizon. The final reckoning wasn't the battle ahead. It was the truth he now carried, and the man he was finally able to become again. Not a convict, not a fugitive,
but the survivor who would bring an empire of corruption to its knees.